Grab some popcorn and a favorite chair. The love of movies is why we're here. Press play and don't delay. Let's still be our guide to a cinematic day. Fill out the movies through the silver screen to his podcast stream. Phil's covering every movie dream. Fill out the movies. Fill out the movies.
And welcome back, my friends, to another episode of Phil at the Movies. I'm your host, Phil Walsh, and you are listening to show number 159 of this ongoing podcast that is, you guessed it, for the love of movies. Welcome back, everybody. As always, thank you for taking the time to tune in each and every Friday. Here to talk about a hell of a fun movie on this week's show, as well as make a special shout-out to an actor that we lost last week, and I did not mention it on the podcast, but I wanted to take a moment and recognize this truly accomplished actor who was taken far too soon. But before I begin with the main event of today's show, if you could be so kind to rate and review this podcast on Apple, it helps a great deal with the pesky algorithm, as well as dropping a review and sharing this with like-minded movie buffs and friends, all about expanding the platform, expanding the audience. And as always, as I say at this time, thank you to you, the listeners, you, the friends of this show. I would not be on 159 episodes without your support and your friendship. So, as always, I say thank you, thank you, thank you. For the love of movies, we will continue on this cinematic journey to... All right, so we may be only a few weeks into the springtime season, but I am feeling the summer vibes after seeing this movie. Get me to those warmer months and those summer nights, if you will. The movie for today's review is Hell of a Summer. It is directed by Finn Wolfhard and Billy Brick. Fans of Stranger Things will recognize Finn for his character of Mike, as well as fans of the new Ghostbuster movies, which also has Wolfhard in them, along with Billy Brick. This movie is from Neon Studios, and this is a clear passion project. This is the debut for both Wolfhard and Brick as directors, and they clearly have a feel and a love for the genre, and it is evident right at the start of this film where two camp counselors are attacked and ultimately killed by a mass killer. Cue the music. We are watching a slasher film, folks, and it just continues right on from there. Now, the plot of this film involves a group of camp counselors opening up Camp Pineway. Perfect name for a summer camp in a horror movie, I must say. They are preparing ahead of the summer rush, and as they get ready for the arrival of the kids for the summertime adventure, a masked killer begins stalking the woods and killing them off one at a time. Now, this is a premise familiar in the subgenre, but the movie here never feels stale. And even though there are definite nods and homages to the tropes and trappings, both Wolfhard and Brick are putting their own spin on this type of movie and actually leaning more into the comedic elements, which was something that I was not expecting. And frankly, that ends up elevating this movie above just another run-of-the-mill traditional slasher film. Now, that being said, the movie is straightforward. There are no third-act twists outside of the conventional routes, and the movie maintains an updated vibe while honoring the many classics in this particular subgenre. I have to say, it's a hell of a good time that, even though it did leave me wanting a little bit more blood, a little bit more suspense and thrills, I still had a great time with it. It is a quick watch. It's barely an hour and a half, but they pack a lot in that particular time. And for a knock that is often accompanying these types of movies. I found the script to be smartly written and the characters to actually be fully developed and realized, and not just the usual sort of slasher fodder, if you will, that tends to be the sort of the run-of-the-mill approach when you're watching a slasher film. Now, unless you are particularly opposed to slasher movies, I don't think you will find anything in this movie scary, but it does maintain an effective grip on the audience by using the camera to set a tone, and that is right from the beginning of this movie, with the aesthetic and vibe of a creepy campground. Even though it's all a lot of broad daylight shots and things are meant to be wholesome and homespun, you know there's something quite off here. And I love it when a film can sort of establish that tone right from the very beginning. Now, before I go into really a critique, and it's not even really a critique of this movie, I will start with the positives. A summer camp horror film is always a plus. Friday the 13th certainly cornered the market, but there are your imitators in this particular category. Your sleepaway camps, your cabin fever, but here in Hell of a Summer, they are certainly playing to the hits. Like this is definitely not a film that shies away or tries to be something that it's not. It is aware that this is another summertime, summer camp set horror film, and it embraces that. And I kind of found that to be charming and refreshing. It wasn't just sort of trying to be something that it wasn't, which, again, a lot of times a movie in this particular realm will try to be too cute by half and then end up not pleasing anybody at the same time. Now, as I said, there is a creepiness to this film that just sort of as a lover of these films and cinema in general, I was really appreciative of just the way they were able to lean into the summer camp aesthetic. And you know, the deaths that do occur on screen, there is a gnarly touch that frankly would make Tom Savini, who was of course with a lot of the Friday the 13th films, known for his over-the-top effects and blood and gore, he would be very proud of what they've been able to accomplish here with this film. And now the mask that the killer wears, it's nothing noteworthy, but it does work with the film's trappings. Like I said, they are aware of what they're doing here, and again, that sort of is the overall charm and big takeaway from it, is that this is clearly two people that understand the horror genre and this particular subgenre, and are putting their own unique spin on it, while at the same time honoring what has come before. You think of, again, Friday the 13th, Sleepaway Camp, etc., etc. Now, the movie itself centers on the character of Jason, played by Fred Heinkinder, and he's a 24-year-old camp counselor returning for yet another summer, despite being well past the age of social acceptability for the role. And he really is the movie's, I feel sort of like a cliche to say it, but he kind of is the heart and soul of this movie, and sort of was a unique twist, if you will, if I could say it that way, even though that's not really a twist, but a kind of a flip on the convention, because generally in these movies you have the quote-unquote final girl, and he would definitely fall more into the category of the final guy, which is more of a rarity or a novelty that is often, only in a handful of films, but they play it, I think, quite well here. He's a lovable goof, and he emotes a natural charm and appeal that can often be lacking in these films. And it was sort of interesting to have that reversal, because he really is the driving force of the film's momentum and narrative. And then plus, his name is Jason. Again, nice little subtle nod to Jason from Friday the 13th. Now, as I said, the humor in this film was frankly something I did not expect. And that is really the big standout from this movie. It is very funny. It's smart, and it's got a quirky take on the genre that never feels like it's being either overly exposed or leaning into canned humor. Instead, we're getting something that is kind of leans more into the absurdity of these types of movies while not being a full parody or a satire. It's a nice balance between the humor and the horror, which, again, sometimes, in the wrong hands, it can kind of lean either in one direction or the other. And so I really have to applaud Wolfhard and Brick here, because they were able to strike a perfect balance between sort of the campy elements, if you will, of these types of movies while still maintaining the essential horror vibe. Now, I think fans are going to enjoy this particular outing in the woods, though it is not as grisly or gory as you might expect, and particularly with the sort of trend in a lot of modern horror films, blood and gore tends to be the kind of mainstay. So this one is much more tamed and reserved. There are a few sort of gnarly kills that, as I said, would make Tom Savini proud, but it is not an over-the-top slasher fest, which, again, was not what I was expecting, though I did appreciate it because it did tend to lean a little bit more into the horror of the imagination. Kind of, what you don't see can sometimes be more frightening than just showing it right in front of you. The show don't tell, but in reverse, if you will, kind of that balancing act. Now, again, if you are expecting this to be a Terrifier type situation, it is not going to be that. This is a much more tame, down the middle, play it safe kind of a film. But again, it's not in a way that is an overall detriment to this film. But I did feel myself wanting more as I was watching it, and I think that would be my biggest criticism of the film, because while the script is sharp and the characters are more than the usual knife fodder that these types of movies usually employ, I did feel it was missing something. I don't know if it was a necessary twist or kind of turn on the conventional wisdom. I don't know if the killer needed to be more of a prominent force. Again, this was a situation where you're really more invested in the characters, the potential victims, if you will, than the person running around in the mask, which is sort of the opposite, if you will, if you think of a Friday the 13th film where the characters are flat and one-dimensional usually, and it's all about, okay, how is Jason going to bump everybody off over the course of 90 minutes? This is much more the reversal, but I think because we are at this point of sort of meta commentary and self-referential humor and takes even on a horror film, you do have to give your audience a little bit more. And I think because the film is so tame, if you will, and again, that's not a criticism, but I think you needed to have a little bit more oomph, particularly with the third act of this film and with the killer and motivation. I think all of that just needed a little bit more zip in order to kind of make this thing all come together perfectly. Because, as I said, it is smartly written, and this is clearly a good take on these types of films. I just felt it needed just a little bit more of a something. And again, what that something is, it's all in the eye of the beholder, I suppose. But for me, I felt like, okay, I'm invested in this film. I'm having a great time with it, but it's missing that ingredient where it's sort of like it when you see it kind of a thing. And so that would be my big critique, if you will. And again, it's not like it's enough to sort of derail this film, because the characters in the movie are kind of worth the price of admission, more so than anything else. You're invested in their journey, their situation, and it is funny. Like the humor in this film never felt forced or over the top. It really does work well with the situation that's going on, and kind of balances a lot of the horror moments. And again, clearly, as I said, Wolfhard and Brick are fans of the genre, and again, with the nice homages to, characters' names like Michael and Jason. Those are nice touches, which certainly I can appreciate. I would not call this film a love letter to the 80s slashers, though there is clearly that vibe and aesthetic going on. I would say this is almost like a nice postcard, if you will, a postcard to 80s slasher horror. The equivalent you might send to the folks while you're away at summer camp. So not quite a full-on love letter like a lot of horror films have been in recent years. I think of films like, more recently, a film like Long Legs or Hard Eyes. Those are just two movies that come to mind, kind of really sending up their particular camps, if you will, within the horror genre. But this definitely felt like a postcard, and I mean that in the best possible way. And so again, while it doesn't reinvent the knife, if you will, it is still a hell of a good time, and I would recommend this film. So the film is hell of a summer. It's got all those essential vibes and aesthetics that we associate with these kind of horror films, with a smart and funny script. I just found myself wanting a little bit more in terms of the overall suspense, the anticipation and reveal and motivation that goes along with the killer in this film. But there we go. I encourage you to check it out. It is a quick watch, about an hour and a half at most, and it is a fun time, which at the end of the day, that's what it's all about when you go see any particular movie, particularly in my point of view. If you have a good time, it's a great night at the movies. And lastly, before I sign off, I wanted to just acknowledge the passing of the late, great Val Kilmer. He passed away last week at the age of 65. So young, and such a loss for the industry, because he was an actor who could not be defined by any one particular role or any one particular genre. He was a leading man, but he was the unconventional leading man. He played so many different roles, and each film he did, whether you think of a movie like Tombstone or Heat or Top Gun or Batman Forever, he was able to bring a charm and a spontaneity that frankly you don't see with too many actors even today. It's been often said that we've lost the age of the movie star, and though while I think there is certainly a resurgence among some of the actors working today, people like Val Kilmer and another sad loss from a few months back, Gene Hackman, they just don't make them like this anymore. These are actors who truly were the epitome of what it meant to be a movie star. And again, I think everybody has their own favorite performance and role, but I just wanted to acknowledge his passing, because it did happen last week, and certainly, again, at the age of 65, I mean, he certainly had some health problems in recent years, but again, just to go at that point, I mean, there's never a good time for someone to pass away, but certainly at that age, it just breaks your heart. But he leaves behind a body of work that is truly impressive. And again, as I said, so many different roles. I mean, when you can play Batman on one hand and Jim Morrison on the other, that is quite impressive, and that is the mark of a great actor. So certainly, may he rest in power, may he rest in paradise. Val Kilmer, he may be gone, but he will not be forgotten, because certainly his body of work suggests a career and a filmography that will stand the test of time. And finally, before I sign off today, I wanted to make a comment about the Minecraft movie that opened this past weekend. Recording this episode on Sunday night, so the final numbers for the film will probably be much higher than what the projections were today. But regardless, you're talking about a film that has made $157 million domestically and over $300 million worldwide. That is a major win for the theatrical experience. It's a major win for the industry as a whole. And of course, this film and its success have generated a lot of articles and think pieces over the last few days, with people trying to understand why this movie resonated and some other films have not. What does this mean? Is it the resurgence of the theatrical movie-going experience? Is it the downfall of cinema? And I don't pay any attention to these kind of articles, but one thing I have noticed, and this has been really apparent on social media, people are, in some camps, extremely happy about this film and its success, and then a lot of people are outright angry and bothered by this film's success. How could a movie like this be so successful? Why are people going to see this kind of a film? And I think it's worth remembering this, and I sort of give this advice as free advice with regards to movies and the movie-going experience. Now, I will say for myself, I have no interest in seeing this movie. It is a movie that is not made for me or my interest, but that's okay. I'm not going to get on a platform and rant and rave about it, because that's a waste of everybody's time, and frankly, who cares? The advice that I would give, and I pass it out as free advice, not every movie will be for everybody, but there is always one for somebody. And I think that is important. At the end of the day, movies are subjective. This is art. What works for you may not work for me, and vice versa. And that's okay. That is the love of movies. We can all have our own unique experience with any piece of cinema. Just as art itself affects people in different ways, so too should movies. So I just wanted to pass that advice along, because I've seen a lot of really hot-headed and irritated takes across social media over the weekend, and I just think it's worth reminding ourselves that not every movie that comes out you have to go see. Just as not every movie is for everybody, but there is always one movie for somebody, and that is what's important. And on that, I will leave you today. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. I'll be back next week, where we will do this all over again for the love of movies.
Feels covering every movie dream. Feel at the movies makes every